Hi, everybody. I'm Greg Fishel, and this is a special update on Hurricane Milton that is really bearing down on the west coast of Florida as I speak. And I am back from New York City. I'm actually recording this from my car in the parking lot of the Myrtle Beach International Airport. So I'm not moving, everything is safe. I wanted to just make sure you knew that. But I learned something today, and it's quite remarkable that I have not noticed this in all the years I've been looking at reconnaissance aircraft reports. And so over here on the far left is the time, okay? And these are in 30-second intervals. So this is Z time, 12:59. We're 4 hours behind that, so that would be 8:59 a.m. and then 8:59:30, 9 o'clock, and 9:01, 9:02, 9:03, 9:04, and 9:05. So at 9:02 a.m., and this is the column where the aircraft is extrapolating what the sea level pressure is at its given location. And so when it makes a pass and it goes through the middle, this is the column I've always focused on. And you can see here that at 9:02 a.m., the lowest pressure, okay, started off 965.4, got down to 941.6, and then went right back up again. So I'm sitting there going, holy cow, this thing was 905 millibars just before sunrise, and now it's at 941.6. This thing is weakening really, really fast. However, and I'll get to this in a second when I show you the next graphic, these are the winds over here. The first three columns are the cardinal wind direction that the wind is coming from, and then the last three columns here are the speed. So this would be 243 degrees at 105 knots, okay? And then 251 degrees at 104 and so forth. But notice all these wind speeds, 112, 108, 101, drops down into the 80s here, but at no point does this wind get light. So the bottom line is this aircraft at the 9:02 a.m. time was not flying through the center, okay? It was flying through the eye wall. And so this pressure was not the pressure in the center of the storm. And imagine my surprise when we got to this. At 10:35 a.m., the new aircraft showed a pressure of 928.8. And I'm sitting there going, all right, now wait a minute. How do we weaken to 941.6 and then re-intensify to 928.8? Well, we didn't do that, okay? Because look at the winds over here in this column here. We had a northeast wind at 75, northeast 74, on down here, northeast at 10, okay? So this is like in the eye with very light winds. And then abruptly, the wind direction goes the opposite of northeast and becomes west-southwest and immediately picks up and goes up to 113 knots. So this, because the wind direction reverses and the speed gets down to very, very light speeds and then speed back up again, this is indicative of the aircraft going right through the middle of the storm. So the 941.6 was not the central pressure, okay? It was the pressure in the eye wall, and this was indeed the pressure in the middle of the storm. So now I know to look at not just this column, excuse me, but this one along with this one, because this tells me whether or not it went right through the middle or whether or not it was going through the eye wall. So it was weakening, but not nearly as rapidly as I thought it was at that particular point in time. Now the central pressure is up to about 950 millibars. Okay, so it has continued to weaken through the day. It just wasn't weakening as quickly as I was thinking it was at that particular time at 9:02 a.m. Okay. Now, let's take a look at the pressures from noon to 6 p.m. at Clearwater, Tampa, St. Petersburg, and the Sarasota Bradenton Airport. Now, there was what looks to be some sort of a mesoscale system that came through Tampa. And you can see here from 1 to 2, the pressure dropped 0.10 inches of mercury, while all the rest of these surrounding areas were less than that, okay? And with these thunderstorms and tornado warnings and so forth that were going on across Florida at that time, it's very, very understandable or believable that you get these little pressure fluctuations going on as these mesoscale systems come through. But if we take a look at 6 p.m., we have a drop of 0.09 in Clearwater, 0.10 in Tampa, 0.05 at St. Petersburg, but look at what happens to Sarasota Bradenton. Minus 0.17, pressure down to 29.04 inches of mercury, okay? So it looks, just based on this, like the center may be aimed south of Tampa, which would spare them the worst storm surge, at least at this point in the storm. The problem is, once the system gets east of them and the wind begins to swing back toward the north and the northwest, then they're going to get an onshore flow. So the worst surge at Tampa may actually occur after landfall, whereas prior to and during landfall, the worst surge is going to be south of Tampa in areas like Sarasota and Bradenton and even points farther south than that. Okay, here is the latest satellite loop, and you can see that the system isn't nearly as impressive as it was even as recently as late last night. There's no well-defined eye anymore. The coldest cloud tops are to the northwest of the center, and the National Hurricane Center pointed out that this system is already beginning to transform into what we call an extratropical cyclone, where it's deriving at least part of its energy from temperature contrast along a frontal zone. And in that situation, the strongest winds are actually going to be north of the center, or at least comparable to what they're going to be south of the center, which usually, in this case, would be the area that you would expect the strongest winds to be, because when you have the wind direction in the same direction of the movement of the storm, which would be southeast of the center, that's where you would expect the strongest winds to be. But because it is making this transition to an extratropical cyclone, those winds on the north side may be very, very impressive as well. Okay, let's take a look now at the radar, and this was at the 6 o'clock hour. And I tell you, the hurricane models did a fabulous job on this in the sense that they indicated that once the wind shear set in, that the entire southeast part of this storm was going to collapse. And indeed, it has done just that. And so you can see that the highest reflectivity is off to the north and northwest of the center, and to the south and east, there is very, very little going on with regard to rain. It doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of wind there, but in terms of rain activity, very, very little. Okay, the 6 o'clock numbers from the Hurricane Center: 27.0 north, 83.3 west, or about 50 miles west-southwest of Sarasota, Florida. Max sustained winds at 120, so it is now a Category 3. And I told you yesterday I was very confident this thing would not make landfall as a 4 or a 5, and it is not going to do that. Movement to the northeast at 15, the minimum central pressure at 948 millibars. Okay. And this is a detailed look at the latest forecast track. And of course, the forecast fan, which indicates the average error, forecast error by the Hurricane Center over the last 5 years, is only about 40 miles when you get this close in. But that 40 miles is going to make a big difference on whether or not Tampa gets a huge storm surge or whether or not they are spared the worst case scenario. You can see the center of the track actually goes between Sarasota and Tampa, but the fan itself goes from Tampa all the way down to Sarasota, okay? So details do matter, okay, in terms of where this thing makes landfall, in terms of who is going to get the absolute worst storm surge. And then you can see that the center is forecast to go pretty close to Orlando. Orlando's sort of on the left-hand side of the fan, but they will definitely get some strong winds out of this, no question about it. And then the system will cross Florida and head out into the Atlantic, definitely staying well south of areas like Charleston and Myrtle Beach and so forth, so they won't get the brunt of this system, as it's not going to recurve and make a second landfall along the southeast coast. That is definitely off the table. All right. So that is the latest on Milton. Landfall should be occurring probably as we approach the midnight hour. I'll try to do another update on this as we approach that time. And again, the local forecast continues to be quiet. The high cirrus clouds are already increasing, the blow-off from Milton, and we'll be seeing those clouds tonight and at least into the first part of tomorrow before they start to retreat off to the east and we get back into a sunny scenario. All right, that's it for now, folks. Hope you have a wonderful Wednesday evening, and we will talk to you again later this evening as Milton begins to make landfall along the West Florida coast. Take care, everybody.